Well, good afternoon. I'm Sarah Kay Bierle with Emerging Civil War, and today Mary Koik is joining me, and she is the Director of Communications and the editor of Hallowed Ground magazine for American Battlefield Trust. So if you are always excited to get that magazine in the mail, you get to hear an interview with the lady who puts it all together and is a fabulous editor. So thank you so much, Mary, for joining me today. And
Absolute pleasure, Sarah. It's great to be here.
it's nice to meet you via Zoom. We were just talking about that before we hit the record button, and that technology does have its benefits at times. So, one of the things that I so admire about what you do is how organized you are. And in 2018, Chris Mikowski did an interview with you, and you were sharing how, with American Battlefield Trust putting out 4 magazines in a year, you're sometimes working on 3 magazines at a time. So, what's that like? Can you share any tips or any
Well,
tips on staying organized?
I'm glad you think I'm organized. I do my best. Sometimes I think we all feel like we're drowning and all the different things going on. It is definitely a balancing act. In the whole world, and I think especially the last year for a lot of people has been, whole new skill sets of being organized and planning and prioritizing that we didn't know we needed to have before.
Right.
I think it really organization is great. And I think that is something that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But I think to me, the key is prioritizing even more than organizing.
Ooh, I like that.
Um, the idea, and I can't remember who initially said it. I wish I could quote it, but we all say we're juggling a lot of balls. And it's the idea of not letting anything drop. Well, that's not quite true. We're juggling different kinds of balls. Some of them are rubber, that we're kind of playing with, and some of them are glass. And you need to just kind of be aware of what are the things that, if it bounces, are going to be okay, and what are the
Mhm.
things that I really need to shepherd and care for and put my time into. I'm a big believer in writing things down. I know there's a lot of great software out there. I've done projects with people in Basecamp, in Asana, in Teamwork. All
Mhm.
of that's great, and they work the best, of course, if you're working with other people who are also using it. Um, Part of the trouble is they only work as well as everyone using it and how much
Right.
everyone's using it. But to me, I am still a paper planner girl. Like, I have a daily planner that's a fresh page every day,
Mhm.
that I just brain dump onto. It can either be a mess inside my head or it can be a mess on the paper, and I'd rather have it be a mess on the paper and I can cross things out and draw arrows and move things around. I think that's important to me, because I think in the last year we've all seen some of those great Netflix shows and things about home organization and stuff. And really, even as a metaphor, even having the perfect shelving system or the best baskets and everything's labeled doesn't get you all the way there if you have more stuff that can fit than can physically fit.
This is
So
true.
really it is about prioritizing. What are the things that need my attention versus the things that just need someone's attention, and trying to figure out where there are efficiencies of things that within the organization. If I need something and the education department needs something that's similar, can we make something do double duty, with a little
Sure.
bit of adaptation? So creativity and prioritizing, I think, are probably the names of the game.
Right. And I love how bringing that prioritizing and everything, it ties right into preservation, which is in the series of interviews that we're doing for Women's History Month, looking at ways that women are involved in historic preservation. And in some of these interviews, we've been talking about preserving family history or grassroots battlefield. And here we're kind of talking about the communications that surround preservation. So, do you want to share a little bit about what you do in case someone hasn't read Chris's interview, or just kind of give us a little scoop on video?
So, I've been with the American Battlefield Trust in one capacity or another for 16 years this month. So
Congratulations.
I was a tiny little version of me, pretty much fresh out of college when I joined the team. And I started off doing kind of grassroots advocacy, and then I had a background in journalism, so did sort of transition and grow into more of the communications role. So I have been the editor of the membership magazine for dozen or so years of that time. And I also sort of do a lot of the day-to-day PR. So the talking to reporters, being that resource if someone has a question about a project that we're working on that, gets quoted in the newspaper or things like that.
Sure.
But we also do a lot of other communications from the organization. So if you're signed up for emails from us, you may get announcements when there's, a property we're declaring victory on, saying, okay, it's done. We've saved it. It is closed, we own it, it's paid, we have the funding in place, let's check that one off and on to the next battle. Or announcing a new campaign, all kinds of things like that. And so kind of being involved in sort of the writing and drafting and vetting of all those communications too that go out. We do have a lot of different stuff. There's newsletters and things like that. And it's a whole team. I don't want to make it sound like I'm one person doing all this, but it's really, it's a group effort. And I think it's probably, a lot of people don't know how much of a female-led effort that is. There's a lot of women on the staff that run kind of our social media accounts and things too. But yeah, that's kind of the background of what when I say I do communications for the trust, kind of what that all entails.
That's really neat. Is there a particular announcement or press release that you've got to do over those years that just really stands out, or one that you were maybe personally very interested in that battlefield save?
Oh, there's been a lot of just moments that you look back on and you're just like, wow, what a day. I think I will never forget, I was packing up to leave the office one day. This was back when there was the controversy about Walmart wanting to build a super center across from the entrance to the park there at the Wilderness. And, this was going all the way to a court fight. And it was the day, there was some preliminary hearings and the trial was set to start the next day. And I am packed, I am ready to go home for the day. And I kind of get a phone call that's just we might need to be prepared for this to get resolved first thing tomorrow morning, with essentially Walmart deciding they were going to do the right thing and find a different location in that community. And so I think that's just one of those phone calls you're never going to forget, of getting that phone call to be prepared for that. Some of the things where we were just sort of looking back, that this end of this month is going to be the 15th anniversary of us making the announcement that we were going to be able to buy the slaughter pen farm at Fredericksburg. And that was, an incredible saga to get there, because there was, development proposals, and it was an industrial site that was being marketed. It was the best industrial site in Virginia, and everyone said it couldn't be done. And just the stars aligned and wonderful things happened to let us get there. And just getting to that moment was one, early in a career there, but you're never going to forget. That was just really tremendous. Getting prepared for the day that we announced that there was going to be the umbrella organization, the American Battlefield Trust, under which the Civil War Trust and the Revolutionary War Trust could live. That was, there was a lot of planning that went into that day before people knew that was coming.
That's amazing. I remember reading the letter that announced that opportunity to start saving Revolutionary War, and just thinking, wow, this is a big change, but it's exciting what opportunities could be coming through it. So it's kind of interesting to think that I was reading your letters and interested in preservation in high school and college years and stuff. It's just amazing, the connections.
It is. It's really the idea of, part of what has made the trust so successful, I think, for a long time, is really sort of taking a 30,000-foot view and saying, here's how we could look at these issues together. And the idea of, each property, of course, is independently important. But when you look at it as a whole, you can, make greater strides. You can, take resources, the human resources and the expertise and things like that, and really make it go further. And that was true going from local or regional preservation groups to a national Civil War group, and doubly so, I think, going to looking at more than one conflict.
Mm-hmm. So kind of thinking about that high overview look and the idea of working together and those sorts of things, I was wondering in the time between 2018 when you chatted with Chris Mikowski and now we're in 2021, there's a lot that's changed in culture, society. I mean, we have changes in language, things like that. Has that been a challenge to navigate? Were things already in place that just kind of keep doing what's going because the inclusive language is already there? Is there something that you can share kind of on how things change and sometimes change rapidly,
You know,
making the PR history challenges?
yeah, it's, history is certainly in the news now in a way it wasn't, even, 2 years ago or three, whatever. It's really kind of wonderful, the idea that there are more people out there who are thinking about history as being something dynamic, that, it is something that does have echoes and things that come down to the present. And I think that's really, when you just stop and think about it, there are, of course, some difficulties and things that have come out as well. But just that idea that people are thinking about how the past matters today, in and of itself, that's pretty wonderful. That there is just this idea as a society that we are thinking and we're asking questions. There are a lot of opportunities in that to teach people,
Right.
important, good history.
Mhm.
And that is our job, that we
Right.
are really drawing out some of these, the word story is at the heart of history. We are
Absolutely.
storytellers and we are telling, some of the greatest, truest stories.
Mhm.
And that people are hungry for that can be a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. And I know that's something that we're really passionate about at Emerging Civil War is
Mhm.
drawing out those stories. And one of the phrases that I like to use is, what's the full picture? What's the full story at this site? Or, and I think just being a little more aware of that, bringing more into the lens, if you will, if we were taking a picture with a camera and, just doing that. So it's so great to hear the history community doing that and the conversation continues.
No, it does. The motto, the tagline for the trust is, it's preserve, educate, inspire. And that
Mhm.
idea of history is compelling. You
Right.
should feel inspired when you hear all of that story. It's just, it is part of the fundamental truth of what history is.
Absolutely. So this might be a good way to go to the question, do you have a favorite person from the Civil War era that inspires you, someone you like to
You
think
know,
about, talk
I
about?
think there are so many great characters in the Civil War. You've got, of course, the legendary generals. You've got women on the home front doing incredible things and stepping up in dramatic and profound ways. What I think I've really been tickled by is the idea of more people leaning into the idea of the common soldiers. And so for me, how you kind of gave me a heads up this question was coming, and so I was going to tell you about Thomas D. Goundry, who is an ancestor of mine, who
Oh,
fought in the 144st First New York. He was there on Missionary Ridge and through the Atlanta campaign, was captured at Bentonville, and all of that. But what I think is so fascinating is I think he and I would be really good friends. You kind of look and you're like, the idea of who would be the favorite uncle in your family tree. You go and you read about things where other people have letters that he wrote where they gave poems to other soldiers. He was writing poetry about his time in the army, and he became the official family historian and wrote like the 3-volume family history and did essays, for the National Tribune, the veterans publication after the war. And I think he would just be absolutely tickled with what I do for a living. I think he and I would have a great time talking.
that sounds, I think so. That would be great. And just that's so neat that he wrote poetry. And
Mhm.
I think the things that you find reading, whether it's the soldiers' letters or diaries or the home front ones, you really get that glimpse of these people were relatable and they made mistakes and they did great things, and we're all human.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. I'm sure you've seen some of the now like animated pictures, the
Yes.
My Heritage stuff. I think it's really just shocking to people. Everyone sees Civil War pictures and they're in black and white, and they forget
Right.
these people lived in color. They
Hmm.
weren't static. They were just as motivated by individual things. They were just as driven and passionate as we are. They aren't
Hmm.
they aren't static. They're not black and white.
Right. One of my favorite little stories that I found, I was reading some, I think it was journals by Jedediah Hotchkiss, who was on Jackson's staff. And he made this mention about he was taking a ride. I think it was in either end of March or beginning of April. And he says the turtles are out all over the roads. And the funny thing was, about the same time that I read that, it was spring last year. And so when I had to run an errand or something, you had to watch out for the turtles, which were trying to cross the roads. It's like, this still happens. We're still looking at, to some extent, a similar landscape and things like
Mhm.
that.
And it's so easy to forget that. It's so easy to get caught up in, the great narrative, and the great figures of history, and forget just how human
Mhm.
everyone was.
So have you got to go and walk in your ancestors' footsteps? Has that been something you've explored
Um,
yet?
not as much as I want to. That's something that certainly is on the list. Of course he was in the 20th Corps, so very much more of the Western theater and doing
Hmm.
that. So a little bit, not quite a family road trip on the weekend to get to do
Right.
all of those. And I have been just to some of these battlefields, in passing, but I've never done the really intentional. I'm going to go stand there, which I know is such a profound experience for a lot of people. And I do look forward to, hopefully soon getting back on the road and being able to do more of that.
Yes. And you mentioned some family excursions, little family road trips. Do you have a favorite battlefield? And that might not be the best wording of the question, but a favorite place you like to go to, walk or explore the history? Do you have a favorite
It's
site
funny.
like
I
that?
think I've gotten to go to so many wonderful places, with the trust. It's really hard to pick just an overarching favorite.
Right.
I think, I have pictures of, my first time at Gettysburg, and then each
Mm.
of my sons, standing in
Oh,
the same
wow.
spot, the then and now. I know I've internalized the need for then and now pictures pretty thoroughly. But so that'll always have a soft spot in my heart. But I think some of the ones that I found that are beautiful and really surprising. I got to go out to Pea Ridge. I was utterly taken aback. I didn't expect that to be as just beautiful a spot, and some of the views there is as lovely as they were. Um, I think the hilarious one I always say is, it's not a Civil War site, but if the most family-friendly battlefield I have yet encountered is Lake George, all the French and Indian War sites in upstate New York, around a little bit south of Fort Ticonderoga. They're small sites. You can hike the entire battlefield with your toddler in a backpack, and then go get ice cream across the street. I mean, it's kind of a very different experience, but it's pretty lovely.
That's nice. I like that you mentioned ice cream. I always tend to find the ice cream spots near all the
Oh my
battlefields when I'm hiking.
Well, good
It's
ice cream,
supporting the local economy.
good ice cream. You gotta get Antietam in the conversation then too, of course. So
Absolutely. I was just up there last weekend doing a little research before the fields get planted. I wanted to walk an area and I was fortunate. It was still chilly out, so the line to get ice cream at Nutter's was not a mile long. I just had to wait a little bit.
it was cold. It's not quite everyone's cup of tea until the temperature is a certain level, but
Exactly.
I'm with you. Go even if it's cold. It's good.
Exactly. So this year was the 160th anniversary since 1861, so the Fort Sumter firing, beginning of the Civil War. And as I was reading back through what you and Chris had talked about, which was in the sesquicentennial, no, I'm sorry, that would have been in the 155th anniversary, but you were talking about the sesquicentennial and you had mentioned that you had laid out content for all the magazines. And I know I can't ask you to give anything away on content.
I will confess
But
I have not done that. I don't know if it's I'm not that organized this time around or what. But of course, I
Okay.
think there's also, a little bit more, with having that integration of Revolutionary War and 1812 content as
Sure.
well. It's a little bit of a different animal in terms of.
Okay.
But I think what's really interesting to think about is that I'm really conscious of when I'm planning a magazine is trying to get stories that are in some way related, that are kind of themed together. Um,
Right.
and it's not always, sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes they're pretty obvious ones. We did one issue that was, the battles that lost the Capitol. And so we had Brandywine, which of course with the Philadelphia campaign, has that repercussion, and Bladensburg and Washington gets burned in 1812. And then, the breakthrough at Petersburg, then you get the, fall of Richmond thereafter. So some of them are pretty straightforward. And then we did one that was we had a victory that we were announcing at Princeton. And so I'm like, okay, well, Princeton's a George Washington story. And we also then had an appeal coming up that was going to launch that was a Cold Harbor one. So suddenly we started doing, these battles where the future president is the, field commander under fire. So that was really fun. But, I think it's really kind of a fun mind-bending challenge to try and pair things up. And you also have to, of course, keep in mind the idea of not doing the same thing over and over. We all, as much as we all love the Gettysburgs and the Antietam's of the world, you can only hit those so often. And we had a great Antietam issue last year where it was the discovery of the S.G. Elliott map, that burial map at Antietam. So I think you're probably not going to see an Antietam for a little bit. That's had its time in the sun without giving anything too big away.
Sure.
But yeah, it's really fun. That's, I think, one of the most fun parts of my job is trying to tease out the ways of connecting different narratives.
Right. And as American Battlefield Trust has been able to expand and do more with Revolutionary War and War of 1812, what a unique opportunity to be coming up with those angles. I mean, that's certainly a lot that's changed in the last 10 years in a neat and positive way. So.
And talking about that idea of the 160th, I think the other thing that's kind of in play here for some folks is sort of at the end of that 160 period for the Civil War is when we hit 250 for the United States.
Right.
So 2026 is of course another huge anniversary in that sense. And just the way that is building, the momentum for that is it's much less an anniversary of the Revolutionary War, and it's an anniversary of that 250-year sweep of history. So I think in some ways, the Civil War 5-year anniversary, I don't know if it's a bonus year or it just kind of gets, part of that. Because of course, the Civil War is such a seminal part of that broad that I think you have to imagine how it's going to be part of how we reflect on the whole looking back.
Right. So that's a new point that I haven't heard discussed yet, is like taking that longer range view. I know a few weeks ago we were having some discussions, well, I guess it was around the beginning of this year at Emerging Civil War. What have we learned since the sesquicentennial? What do we think the 160th is going to look like? I think that's the first time I've heard it in that longer range view. That's really fascinating, and it will be exciting to see how it plays out.
And again, that idea of, these are narratives that sometimes you can look at it in the moment of one particular battle or one particular conflict, but so many of these ideas and themes and narratives, it's the thread that goes through the whole time frame.
That's so exciting, and I'm sure we'll be seeing a little bit of women's history in that as well. Since that, hopefully. So, well, thank you so much for chatting about these themes and these projects. Do you have some final inspiration, words of wisdom, thoughts you want to share as we start wrapping up?
That's, I always wish I had something truly deep and profound, to say. I think one thing that I was reflecting on getting ready to have this chat today is just how wonderful it's been. I don't know if it means I've just been doing public history and preservation for so long, but just the greater number of women who really are involved in these, I think, has been really something great to see over time. And it's just women who are there having these conversations and having these, seats at the table and talking about things that weren't necessarily what was expected, that was going to be what parts of history women were assumed to be interested in. And I think it's been really wonderful to reflect on and have seen.
Absolutely. And as we see more women in the history field, I think it's so lovely to um, acknowledge whose footsteps each generation's following in. And so I just want to thank you for being inspiring to me, as you're a writer and so active in the history field. And it's really inspiring to meet you via Zoom. And I just want to thank you for being that inspiration, and just take this opportunity to say thanks for trailblazing for
Oh,
women in preservation.
I'm thrilled to hear you say that, and I just, again, I know this is also the 10th anniversary year for emerging Civil War, and just how incredible it has been to watch that community grow too.
Mhm.
Just looking back at some of the first sort of magazine features I did that had emerging Civil War authors in them, and just having seen this community become so vibrant and so dynamic, and just the breadth and sweep of what gets covered in it has just been, it's great. I honestly can't, I don't know that maybe it was I lacked vision to imagine what it could be 10 years ago, but it's certainly just absolutely wonderful to have seen it flourish.
Well, thank you. It's a continually emerging story. And if someone's out there listening and wants to jump in with some guest blogging at Emerging Civil War, always welcome. And I hope that they would reach out, because it can be a great starting point to then, get deeper into other
Mhm.
parts of the history community or working in the history field. So
Indeed.
thank you so much. Happy Women's History Month.
Thank you. You as
And
well.
thank you.